I was just a little girl when it all started. I remember very clearly the last time I saw my mother alive. She was lying in bed, already very weak, but she still held my hand so sweetly that I can still feel her warmth on my fingers. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Be strong, my love." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I only understood much later. I thought she would get better, that she would soon get up from that bed and go back to braiding my hair before school. But she never came back. After she left, my world went gray. I would wake up and there would no longer be the smell of coffee with milk coming from the kitchen, nor the sound of her voice singing softly while ironing. The house seemed different, cold, empty. I was just a child, and all I wanted was someone to call me daughter, to look at me with love. I just wanted a mother. My father tried to be strong. I saw that, but he didn't know how to deal with a girl who was so small and hurt. He was one of those closed-off men who didn't know how to talk to children. Suddenly, he started coming home late, with the smell of strange perfume on his clothes, and a different way of speaking. One day, he sat me on his lap and said, "You'll like her. She'll take care of us." I didn't know who her was. And honestly, I didn't want anyone. I wanted my mother back. When the woman arrived, she was all dressed up, smelling nice, and smiling. She was holding a cake in her hands, and said she was going to be my new mother. I hid behind the couch. I was shy and scared. I didn't want a cake. I wanted to be held, but she came in smiling, crouched down, and said, "You'll see, we're going to get along really well." And I, foolish, wanted to believe it. In the early days, she was all affection. She braided my hair, just like my mother used to do. She called me my love, and even read me a little story before bed. I went to bed with a heavy heart, but with a little glimmer of hope. Could it be that God had sent me a new mother? But it only took my father time to convince himself that everything was okay. All he had to do was trust her. All he had to do was believe that she was a good woman. All he had to do was get a little attached. The mask fell off. She started to change with small gestures. First, she stopped calling me my love. Then, she started to ignore me when I spoke. I would ask her for something, and she would pretend not to hear. When my father arrived, she would smile, hug me, and pretend that everything was perfect. And I, silly, thought it was my fault. That maybe I was doing something wrong. One night I woke up with a fever. I called her. I just wanted a glass of water and a blanket. She came into the room, huffing and puffing, looked at me angrily, and said, "Aren't you going to let me sleep in peace, even now?" That hurt more than the fever, more than any illness. Because a sick child just wants to be held. And all I got was contempt. As time went by, she began to look at me with disgust. I felt dirty just by existing. If I left a toy out of place, she would scream. If I ate slowly, she would bang her plate. One time, she said, "Not even your mother wanted to keep you. That's why she died." I froze. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I just froze, and I wished I could disappear, but I kept trying. I tried to please her. I made the bed, washed the cup, did everything right. I thought that if I was good, she would like me. I would watch the other girls with their mothers, laughing at the school gate, exchanging affection. And I thought, will I ever have that again? I remember one time I drew a picture. It was me, my father, and her, holding hands. I drew it with great affection, and left it on her bed, with a little candy I got at school. The next day, she tore up the paper in front of me and said, "Do you think this will make me love you?" From that day on, I stopped drawing. I stopped dreaming. I started growing up with a hole inside me. I didn't understand what was wrong. I couldn't imagine that someone could hate so much a child who only wanted love. And the worst part, no one noticed because she was a woman. Because she was my father's wife. And women don't do bad things, right? When we are little, we believe in good. We believe that every woman has a mother's instinct, that every home has love. But I learned early on that there are people who take on the role of mother just for convenience, just to show society, just to deceive, and I was just a little girl wanting to be held, wanting someone to say, "You're sweet, you're my daughter." I didn't want much. I just wanted some love. She had a talent that scares me even today, just thinking about it. She knew how to pretend. She knew how to pretend like no one else. She was one of those people who would put on a pretty dress, put on red lipstick, and everyone around her would think she was the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the golden woman who saved a widower with an orphan daughter. She knew how to smile, but her smile was a mask. In front of others, she made a point of calling me little daughter. She would take me by the hand, hug me with those cold arms, and squeeze me until my chest hurt. And she would say in a sweet, well-trained voice, "This girl is my blessing. I take care of her as if she were my own." And everyone would applaud, praise, and think she was beautiful. "You're so lucky, girl," they would say to me. "You have a stepmother like that. You don't even seem like a stepmother." But when the living room door closed and the visitors left, the tone of voice changed, the look changed, and the name also changed. I stopped being a little daughter and became a pest, inedible, disgrace that your mother left for me. And I couldn't tell anyone about this, because who would believe me? Everyone saw a smiling woman, who took cake to the church fair, who helped at the school bazaar, who offered rides to the parents of other students. She made a point of appearing saintly, and she was such a good actress that for a long time I thought the problem was with me. That perhaps I wasn't worthy of the love she displayed publicly. I began to think that I must really be hard to love, that I was doing something wrong without knowing it, because she was so sweet to others, and so bitter to me. I remember once, at school, the teacher called me to ask if everything was okay at home. And before I could say anything, my stepmother appeared at the gate, with a wrapped cake and a smile from ear to ear. "She's just shy like that, teacher. She lives in a dream world, but at home she's an angel. We get along so well." The teacher laughed and praised me for having such a caring mother. I lowered my head and accepted the compliment as if it were my own. But deep down, my stomach hurt. It hurt with fear. Because I knew what was waiting for me when we got home. There was a place in the house that was her favorite theater, the kitchen. That was where she would pose the most when my father arrived. She would sit at the table with him, serve him coffee, and ask him about his work with affection. And she would always find a way to say, "You're doing great, girl. I even made that candy she likes. We're getting along so well." And my father believed her. He would smile. He would look at me and ask, "Is it true, daughter?" I would smile back and say, "Yes, Dad." Because if I said it wasn't true, he would get angry, and she would take it out on me as soon as he left for work the next day. That was her game. Manipulate. Charm on the outside and poison on the inside. And I, as small as I was, learned to recognize the signs. I knew when she was going to fake a smile. I knew when she was going to scold me disguised as advice. When she was going to pretend to be affectionate just to impress someone. And I knew, with fear in my chest, when she was going to wait for the door to close, to let the monster out. One time, on her wedding anniversary with my father, she threw a beautiful party. She invited neighbors, church friends, and even my cousin. They spent the whole day doing my hair and getting me ready, telling me that I was going to be the little princess of the party. I felt important for a moment. Just for a moment. When the party started, she made me give my father a flower and say words that she had written on a piece of paper. I read them as she told me to. Everyone applauded. They said that she was an exemplary stepmother. That night, after everyone had left, and the house was quiet, she called me into the kitchen. Without raising her voice, without shouting. She made me clean everything by myself. "Since you were the star, now be useful too." I stayed up until almost dawn, scrubbing pots. My hands were small, and my heart was broken. The next day, when I went to school with dark circles under my eyes, she sent a little note to the teacher, saying that I had stayed up so excited about the party. And the teacher hugged me. She said I was lucky to have a family like that. I asked myself, day after day, does no one see? Does everyone only see what they want to see? Because I screamed with my eyes, but no one listened. I trembled just hearing her heels hitting the floor. But everyone thought she was an example of a strong woman. And I became small. Small inside, I hid in baggy clothes. In the corners of the house. In the back of drawers. Because that was the only place where she didn't pretend to love me. There, she just ignored me. And ignoring, at that moment, was already better than pretending. Perhaps the cruelest thing of all was this, the silence she imposed, the show she put on, the prison disguised as affection. Because when a woman pretends to love, and spreads lies with a smile on her face, no one imagines that behind the lipstick and apron there is daily torture. And I was Just a girl begging for someone to look beyond her smile, because everyone saw what she showed. But no one wanted to see what she hid. They weren't slaps, they weren't screams. They weren't visible aggression. The first pains I felt from her didn't leave marks on my body, but they hurt as if something had broken inside. They were words. Words that no one saw, that no one heard, but that remained embedded in my soul, like hidden thorns. I must have been about 7 years old when she started to change her tone. Before that, even though she was cold, she still pretended to be kind. But one day, out of nowhere, I dropped a glass in the sink. It was by accident. I was startled by the sound of the glass. She came over with her eyes wide open, breathing heavily, and she said, "You only cause losses. You're not even good for that." It was the first time she had said something like that to me, and I didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed. I tried to pick up the pieces with my hand. I cut myself. It bled. And she didn't even look. She just mumbled, "Serves you right." From that day on, words began to flow from her mouth like poison. But it was poison in disguise. She knew how to hurt with delicacy. She would say things like, "You take after your mother, weak and useless. Don't look at me like that. You look like a ghost. Not even the devil can stand such a boring girl." And me. I listened silently. Because I didn't know that it was evil. I thought it was true. One time, when I got a good grade in school, I happily showed it to her. It was a difficult math test. I had studied in secret, at night, with a flashlight under the blanket. Because she said that leaving the light on after 8 o'clock was a waste. When I handed her the paper, trembling with joy, she didn't even read it. She just looked at me and said, "Do you want a reward for doing your duty? Go sweep the room." At that moment, I learned that my joy didn't fit there. That any good thing I did would be despised. Joy turned into fear, because every time I tried to show something of mine, it gave me back pain. She had a cruel way of comparing me with other children, with daughters she didn't have, with those she thought were better than me. She would say, if I had a real daughter, she would be smart, educated, beautiful, not what you are. And I, hearing this at such a young age, began to believe that I was defective, that there was something wrong with me since I was born. Her words were erasing me. I spoke less and less. I shriveled up at school and avoided looking my classmates in the eye. When someone complimented my hair, I would quickly respond, "It's just hair." When the teacher said I had a talent for writing, I was embarrassed. Because at home, my writing was the nonsense of someone who has nothing better to do. And the saddest thing is that on the outside, I still smiled. I still pretended I was okay. Because if I cried, she would say, "Are you going to cry? Cry properly then. Learn from the soap opera actresses." She even invalidated my suffering. She taught me that pain was a waste of time, that sadness was drama, and that my existence was a nuisance. There was a word she repeated a lot, punishment. But not in the sense of a just punishment. She said I was a punishment, a mistake, something that God had left there as a reminder of the death of the previous woman. I was the shadow of what she wanted to forget, and she made sure to remind me of that every time she could. I remember one afternoon when I caught the flu, fever, chills, headache. I was curled up on the couch, with my eyes closed. She passed by, looked at me and said, "You're just pretending so you don't have to do what you have to do. You're not even good enough when you're sick." I didn't ask for help anymore. Never again. I learned to take care of my pain on my own. Because I knew that if she opened her mouth, another one of those sentences that tore me apart would come out. And time passed, and I stopped being a child. But her words remained. Because there are people who believe that words are carried away by the wind, but don't take it. There are words that the wind spreads and that the soul keeps like an invisible tattoo. And hers stayed inside me for years. Years and years without me realizing how much they had shaped me. Every time someone said they loved me, I was suspicious. Every time someone said I was beautiful, I looked away. Every time someone wanted to take care of me, I ran away. Because deep down, I still heard her voice saying, "Nobody will want you. You were a mistake. Not even your mother saved you. Imagine me." My father's silence in the face of all this also hurt. Because he heard some things. Not everything, but he heard, and even then he would say, "Your stepmother is just nervous. That's all." She doesn't take it seriously, and I took it, every word, every wound, every lie she planted as the truth. If I close my eyes today, after so much time, I still hear some phrases. They come as a whisper, as an echo. But today I recognize them for what they are. Perversity disguised as politeness. Evil with makeup. But when I was a little girl, when I was a little girl, those words were the world. And in that world, I was just the girl who grew up believing she was worthless. There are things that take years for us to have the courage to say out loud. Even when we're adults. Even when we're grandmothers. Because there are wounds that time doesn't erase. It only teaches us to hide them. But there comes a time when our hearts ask us to let them out. And that time has come for me. I remember exactly the day everything changed. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a beating. It was the look in her eyes. A look I had never seen before. A look that wasn't one of anger. It was one of power. As if to say, now I can do anything. And, at that moment, she really could. No one listened to me. No one saw me. My father was already blinded by that false peace she pretended to offer. And I was already just a shadow inside that house. The first time she really crossed the line was late one afternoon. I was about 9 years old. I was playing alone in my room with an old doll. That was all I had left as a reminder of my mother. That doll was my refuge. He was the one I talked to when I was scared, when I felt invisible. She came in suddenly, without knocking, with red eyes, smelling of alcohol. I didn't know she drank in secret, but that day, I found out. She looked at me and said I was laughing at her, that I was doing it on purpose to irritate her. I tried to tell her it wasn't like that at all, that I was just joking, but she wouldn't listen. She snatched the doll from my hand and tore it up right in front of me. I cried. I couldn't contain myself. It was then that she grabbed me by the arm so hard that it left a purple mark. She locked me in the bathroom and said, "If you don't learn to respect me, I will teach you with pain." I stood there for hours, in the dark, hungry, scared, and for the first time, I thought about disappearing for real. After that, things got worse. She started to make a point of touching me, not as a mother, but as someone who wanted to prove dominance. She would grab me by the chin to force me to look her in the eyes. She would tell me that I was nothing, and that nothing has no will of its own. Sometimes, she would make me kneel on the corn in the kitchen for hours, telling me that I needed to learn what submission was. But it was on a rainy night that she crossed all limits, a night that took me a long time to tell anyone. I had accidentally wet the living room floor. I had come in from the street with the hem of my uniform dirty with mud. She became furious. She screamed, locked all the doors, turned off the lights, and forced me to stay in the backyard, in the rain, only in my nightgown, until the ground dried. I trembled. I cried. I knocked on the door. I asked to come in. She said, "You will learn that those who defy authority pay the price." I had a fever that night. I don't know how I didn't get sick anymore, but I think God held my soul tightly, because my body had no strength left. Over time, she began to invade even the little privacy I had. She made me take a shower with the door open. She would enter my room without warning, rummage through my things, and say that everything in there was hers, including me. She would use my clothes to clean the floor. She would throw my school letters in the trash. And every time I complained, she would say, "You don't own anything, not even your own life." I grew up feeling ashamed of my body, afraid of my smell, hating my reflection in the mirror. Because everything about her was control, dominance, silence. She didn't have to raise her hand every day, because the terror came in her eyes, in her small gestures, in her cruel whispered words. And when she hit, it wasn't with anger, it was coldness. And that coldness hurt more than the slap. She once made me stand for hours with a book on my head and my arms outstretched. Just because I had stuttered in front of a visitor. She said, "My daughter is not ashamed." But I wasn't her daughter. And that was what hurt the most, because she punished me as if I were. But she never loved me as such. People remained blind. They said she was demanding, that she was educating, that I would thank her in the future. But I knew. That wasn't education. That was perversity. She didn't want to shape me as a person, she wanted to destroy me from the inside. To erase me, and somehow, he did it. For a while, he did it, because I went dark. I became mute. I became cold. I learned to walk without making noise, to breathe without attracting attention. I learned to lie with my face, to pretend I was okay so I wouldn't get hit, so I wouldn't bleed inside again. But the hardest part of all was going to sleep, scared, scared of waking up and finding her by the bedside. Scared of dreaming, and, in the middle of the night, hearing her say softly, "You will never amount to anything, and no one will save you." These were the words that marked my childhood. Not said in a shout, but in a whisper. And I, as a child, believed her. Because she was in control. Because she smiled in front of others, and put me to sleep on the cold floor of the room when no one was looking. It was at that time that I understood. There are abuses that don't leave blood, but they kill all the same. They kill hope. They kill joy. They kill childhood, and in my case, they almost killed faith. But something inside me still resisted, even weak, even hurt, even small. I still dreamed that one day, someone would look at me and see what she hid so well. I didn't know when, or how. But deep down, I knew that that truth couldn't stay buried forever. There are screams that make no noise. There are cries that the throat swallows because it has learned that no one can hear. And there are cries for help that become whispers on the pillow, so as not to awaken the fury of the person sleeping in the next room. I learned this very early on. After my stepmother started pushing the boundaries, I tried to speak up. I swear I did. I still had a glimmer of hope, deep down, that someone would see. That someone, some kind soul, would hear my weak voice and do something. The first person I tried to tell was my school teacher. I trusted her. She was affectionate, always complimented my drawings, and called me sweet girl. One day, after class, I waited for everyone to leave the room, and said quietly, "Can I tell you something?" She smiled, sat down next to me, and I started talking. But as soon as I said that the woman in my house hits me, she frowned. She asked if it was a punishment, if it was with a belt, if it was just once or always. And I, confused by the childish words, couldn't explain it properly. She looked at me doubtfully, said that maybe it was a misunderstanding, and that she was going to talk to your parents. I panicked. I asked her not to do that, because if she did, my stepmother would find out, and if she found out, I would pay dearly. The next day, when I got home, the door was already ajar. She was waiting for me, and the look in her eyes, I will never forget it, cold, empty, furious. She grabbed my arm and said, "Do you want the world to think I'm a monster? Well, then you'll see what a monster does." That night, I slept on the bathroom floor, my face swollen and my heart in fear. I promised myself that I would never try to tell anyone again. But silence weighs heavily. It weighs so much that we end up sending out signals even without meaning to. Once, I drew a little house with a sad girl locked inside. The teacher saw it, called the coordinator. They held a meeting with my father. He went, listened, and when he got home, he asked with a smile, "What have you been up to that even at school? They're saying you're sad." I didn't answer, because he didn't really want to know. He just wanted to keep up the image that everything was fine. And my stepmother, as always, had already prepared her version. She has a very fertile imagination. She must have seen these things in soap operas. And he believed, or pretended to believe, because it was easier, more comfortable. It was easier to think that I was a strange child than to admit that he had put a monster inside our house and left me in its hands. There was a day when I cried so much that my throat hurt. I cried until I almost passed out. It was the middle of the night, and I was huddled behind the door of my room, crying softly, burying my face between my knees. I just wanted a hug. Just one. From anyone. I felt so alone, so invisible, that I even thought, will anyone notice if I disappear? I screamed silently many times, when she hurt me and said it was too educate. When she forced me to eat spoiled food as punishment. When she left me for days without talking to me, pretending I didn't exist. I screamed with my eyes, with goosebumps on my skin, with trembling hands. But no one saw. At church where my father took me on Sundays, I looked at the altar and only asked for one thing: God, send someone to see. I didn't ask for gifts. I didn't ask for toys. I just asked to be seen, to be heard. But it seemed that even God was silent. The other children spoke of their mother with pride. I just smiled and changed the subject. I was ashamed. Ashamed of not having a real mother. ashamed of living with someone who hated me, ashamed of crying alone every night. I felt wrong, as if it was my fault. I remember a distant aunt who came to spend a few days at my house. On the second day, she saw me cleaning the floor with a toothbrush, on my knees. She looked at me and said, "Girl, get up. Where's your mother?" My stepmother appeared at the door and said, smiling, "It's just that. She made art, and we believe in discipline." The aunt laughed and said, "You're tough, huh, woman?" And he never brought it up again. That was the last time anyone from the outside was close enough to notice. After that, my stepmother never left me alone with anyone. Always watching, always smiling when necessary, and with her eyes always ready to turn into knives when the door closed. And the worst part is that the whole neighborhood thought I was ungrateful. Because she donated clothes to the nursing home, took soup to the church, and baked cakes for parties. No one suspected that behind that exemplary woman, there was a creature capable of breaking a child's soul in silence, without bloodshed, without scandal, but efficiently. Over time I stopped crying. Not because the pain went away, but because my body got tired. Crying became useless. Screaming became dangerous. Talking became a risk, and living became just about enduring. And yet, deep down in my chest, a little piece of me still wanted to be saved. A little piece that, no matter how hurt, still believed that someone, somewhere, could truly hear me. But for many years, that someone never arrived. What hurt me the most was not the punishments, nor the shouting, nor the days without food, or the nights in the cold. What hurt the most was what she said next, always after, when everything had already passed, and I was there, curled up, trying to understand why. She slowly bent down, looked me in the eyes, and said, "You were the one who made me do this." She planted guilt in me like someone who throws poison into fertile soil. And since I was a child, that poison grew. It grew fast. It grew crookedly. It grew deep. And I began to believe that the evil came from me. Everything about her was a game of reversal. If she hit me, it was because I provoked her. If she cursed me, it was because I didn't cooperate. If she left me without food, it was to teach me not to be ungrateful. And when I cried, she laughed, crossed her arms, and said, "Look how weak you are, just like your mother. That's why I have to be tough. If you had been born right, none of this would have happened." This phrase stayed with me for a long time. I even thought about it when I brushed my teeth. If I had been born right. What do you mean, wrong? How? What had I done? I didn't understand. But even without understanding, I carried the guilt as if it were a natural punishment for existing. She said that my presence in the house was the weight that kept things from working out. That because of me her marriage with my father was not a happy one. That because of me she felt tired, sick, bitter. "You dry everything you touch," she said. And I started to walk around afraid of touching things. I avoided using the pretty glasses. I didn't sit on the new sofa. I felt like an unwanted little animal inside a glass house. I started apologizing for everything. For breathing loudly. For existing. For moving me. For dreaming. I would even apologize when someone complimented me. Because in my head, if someone saw something good in me, it was because they didn't know me well. And that, sooner or later, I would also discover what she knew, that I was a mistake. One time, I hurt my knee at school. I fell while running in the playground. The coordinator called home. She came to pick me up with a long face. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't hug me. When we got home, she locked the door and said, "Even when you fall, you want to attract attention. Don't you get tired of ruining everything?" She had a gift for turning my pain into an accusation. And when someone did something nice for me, a gift, a gesture of kindness, a word of support, she would turn it back on me. She would say that I was just a manipulator, that I used other people's pity as a weapon. "You are like those women who deceive men, who pretend to be weak to control everyone." And I, at 10 years old, heard this and I tried to understand what kind of woman I was for her to see me like this. I started to hate myself, to hide from myself. I was ashamed to look at myself in the mirror. I was disgusted by my skin. I avoided smiling, because she said my smile was forced, that it was ugly, that no one believed it. She could even turn affection against me. If I tried to hug her, she would pull away and say, "Do you think affection can be bought? There's no point in trying to be charming. "You're a burden." That hurt more than any spanking. Because a child who doesn't receive affection starts to think he doesn't deserve it. And then, he starts to punish himself. That's what I started doing. When she fought, I blamed myself before she said anything. When she disappeared with me for hours in the dark room, I thought, she's right. I ruined everything. And worse, I started protecting her in front of others. When someone asked if everything was okay, I smiled. When the teacher noticed sadness on my face, I lied. Because I thought that if I told the truth, the world would realize what I really was: guilty, monstrous, defective. My father, he believed in her, always. If I cried, he would say, "You're doing something wrong, because she's a good woman." If she got angry, "It's because you provoked her." And so, her truth became my reality. Years passed. I grew up with this guilt seeping through my pores. Every time something went wrong in my life, I would revert to that voice: "It's your fault." When a boyfriend dumped me, I would think, "I'm not enough." When I lost a job, I messed up again. When someone walked away, they must have gotten sick of me. It took me so long to understand that it wasn't me, that the evil was in her, that I was a good girl who just wanted to be loved, and that she used that as a weapon to break me. But when we grow up with guilt implanted in our hearts, unlearning to hate ourselves takes time. Looking back, I know now, she didn't just want to hurt me. She wanted me to believe I deserved it. Because that's how abusers win. Not when they yell or hit, but when they convince their victim that it's all fair, that it's punishment, that it's fate. And I almost believed that forever. I used to think my dad was my hero. When I was very little, before my mom passed away, I would feel safe just hearing the sound of his keys coming in. He had a serious demeanor, but sometimes he would smile with his eyes. He would pick me up and tickle my ribs and say, "That girl is strong, just like her daddy." And I believed him. I believed he would never let anyone hurt me. But life has a bitter way of dismantling our heroes. After my mother died, he became different. Quieter, more distant. He started coming home late and talking to me less. I thought it was sadness, and maybe it was. But after that woman came into our lives, his silence turned into something else. It turned into blindness. It turned into cowardice. At first he seemed enchanted. His stepmother did everything right in front of him. She prepared the food he liked, pretended to care about me, gave me a little kiss on the forehead when he was looking. I was confused. I didn't know what was true. All I knew was that when he left, she looked at me differently, as if to say, "Try anything and you'll see." And yet, even without understanding much, I waited for him. I waited for him to notice, for him to look more closely, for him to notice my lowered eyes, my scarred arms, my muffled voice. I waited for him to be my shield. But he never was. One day she hit me with her belt buckle over a scribbled notebook. The mark remained on my skin. Red, then purple. I kept my long sleeves on even in the heat. But that night, while we were eating dinner, the sleeve slipped down. He saw the mark. He stopped for a second. I froze inside. I wanted him to ask, to say something, to stand up for me. But all he said was, "You need to stop causing trouble." I felt my world fall apart. It wasn't just my body that hurt, it was my soul. Because he had seen it. He had seen it and chosen to do nothing. He was the kind of man who thought that the woman is the boss in the house. He said that she doesn't get involved in raising children. That she was educating me. That every girl needs discipline. And I began to realize that his silence was more dangerous than her screams. Because he was the only chance I had. The only one. And he preferred not to see it. One time I plucked up the courage and went to his room. He was reading the newspaper. I knelt down beside his bed and whispered, "Dad, I'm not okay. She treats me badly. She hurts me." He put down the newspaper, took a deep breath, and said, "You need to learn to live with her. She is your new mother. Don't set fire to where there is peace. Fire where there is peace." That echoed in my head for weeks. I was the fire. I was the disturbance. I was the problem. Since then, I never tried to talk to him about it again. Because I understood. I understood that he knew. And that, even knowing, he chose silence. And that hurt more than any punishment. His silence made me doubt my worth. Because if even my father, the man who held me in his arms, who saw me born, didn't defend me, then maybe she was right. Maybe I really did deserve all of this. And the worst part is that, on the few occasions when he showed affection, it hurt too. Because it was an affection that didn't last. An affection that only appeared when she wasn't there, as if he was also afraid of her. As if he knew what she was capable of, but preferred to keep it all hidden, locked away, hushed up. I don't know what he saw when he looked at me. If he saw his daughter, who had lost her mother, or if he saw a threat to his new life. All I know is that, as the years went by, he became more absent. He went to bed early, left early, avoided conversations. And when family came to visit, he smiled, showed them around the house, and said that everything was fine. She is a blessing, that woman. She raised my daughter as if she were her own. And when I heard this, I felt like screaming. But the scream was stuck in my throat. And if I cried, he would get angry. He would say that spoiled girls have no future. Spoiled me when I was 11. I wrote him a letter. I wrote it in pencil, in secret. I didn't tell him any details. I just asked, "Dad, listen to me. Please listen to me." I left it under the pillow, where he read it. The next day, she called me into the kitchen. She tore up the letter in front of me, and whispered, "I found it before he did. And if he tries again, he'll never write again." That night, my father didn't even look me in the eye, and I knew, he knew. But he chose her side. Because his silence was no longer ignorance, it was complicity. And this is one of the hardest pains I carry to this day. Because one thing is to suffer at the hands of someone you already distrust, another is to realize that the person who should protect you chose not to see you. My father never raised his hand to me. He never hit me. He never yelled at me. But his silence broke me more than any slap. Because a child who grows up without a voice becomes an adult who doubts himself even when asking for a hug. And I became this silent girl in a woman's body, missing a hero who only existed in memories from before my mother's death, before the silence, before the abandonment, disguised as normality. And it all started with a father who chose to remain silent. Every child who lives in prison dreams of freedom. Even without understanding what freedom is, the soul knows it. The body yearns for it. The skin feels it. And I, at that time, didn't know what it was like to have a home. But I knew exactly what I wanted to escape from. The plan began one night when I heard her say, for the 1000th time, that she regretted leaving me alive, that it would have been better to send me to an orphanage. Those words were full of contempt, but that night, they lit a different light inside me. I thought, maybe the orphanage would be better. Maybe anywhere would be. I was 12 years old. I already understood that what I was experiencing was not normal. I already knew that other girls had mothers who protected them, fathers who listened to them, homes that weren't war zones. And that night, I decided, I was going to run away. It wasn't an elaborate plan. It was just a desperate wish. Waited for her to fall asleep. I waited for my father to snore. I had already hidden some cookies in a tin in the back of the wardrobe. I put on the warmest shirt I had, which was still too thin, and tied my sneakers so tightly that my toes hurt. I was shaking, more from fear than from the cold. I opened my bedroom window very slowly. Jumping from there, I fell straight into the garden. It was a low fall. It hurt my knee, but I didn't cry. I had already cried enough in silence within those walls. I just took a deep breath and started walking. I walked down streets I didn't really know. I had no idea where to go. I just knew that going was better than staying. I walked for about 2 hours until I found a gas station. I hid behind some tires. There, finally, I collapsed. I curled up and cried softly. I was tired. I was hungry. I was afraid of being caught. I was afraid of being forgotten. It was a gas station attendant who saw me. A middle-aged man with kind eyes. He approached me slowly and asked my name. I made up another one. I said I was lost. He took me to a small room with a coffee shop. He gave me water and let me sit down. He called the police. I panicked. I started crying again, saying I didn't want to go home. A young police officer crouched down in front of me and asked, "Why did you run away, my daughter?" And there, for the first time, I tried to tell him everything. I stuttered. I cried. I got the words out as best I could. I talked about hunger, punishments, fear. He looked at me seriously. Then he exchanged glances with his colleague. They wrote everything down. They said they would check it out. But in the end, they took me back home. My stepmother welcomed me with tears in her eyes. A performance worthy of a soap opera. He hugged the police officer, thanked him for finding me. She said I had emotional issues, that she was confused since losing her mom, that she was trying to help. My father. He barely looked at me. He just said, "You just embarrass me." That night she didn't hit me. She didn't yell. She just looked at me as I huddled in the corner of the room, and she whispered, "The next time you try to run away, no one will find you." And I believed. I believed so much that I never tried to run away again. After that, things changed. Not for the better, they changed in ways. She became more careful, quieter. She hurt me less with her hands and more with her words. She knew they were watching Evan, if only superficially. The school called my father to talk. The child protection counselor came to our house once. But my stepmother was cunning. She always had a ready answer. Always a cry in the air. She said I was disturbed. That I was dramatic. That I needed treatment. And, once again, the doors were closed to me. And me. I stopped believing that I could escape. I started to escape in other ways. I hid inside myself. I closed myself off. He drew pictures of girls in cages, wrote letters he never delivered. I invented a world of my own, where I could be happy. A world where there was a mother who loved me, a father who listened to me, a house with the smell of warm bread and laughter in the living room. But the reality was different. Every time I saw a police car on the street, my heart would pound. A part of me still hoped that one day one of those men in uniform would come back. Not to take me back, but to get me out of there. That escape attempt left a mark on me, because it was the day one tested the world. The day I screamed in public. The day I ran with my feet, with my soul, with everything a child can carry. But the world didn't hold me back. Years later, as an adult, with children and grandchildren, I still remember that night. The backpack with cookies in it, the open window, the wind in my face, and the fear. A fear that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Because the day I tried to escape wasn't just a day of despair. It was the day I discovered that sometimes the world closes its eyes, even when we're on our knees, bleeding, asking to be seen. And when that happens, the child who tried to escape learns to survive, not because he won, but because he had no choice. Guilt. This word lived within me like a shadow. It was in every gesture, in every thought, in every choice I made. Since I was little, I learned to ask myself first and foremost, what did I do wrong? It didn't matter what happened. If someone walked away, it was my fault. If something broke, it was my fault. If I felt sad, even that was my fault. My stepmother planted this in me like a poisoned seed, and my father watered it with his silence. It grew until it became a dark forest inside my chest. And when I grew up, when I became a woman, it wasn't freedom that arrived. It was the echo of everything I heard as a child. It took me many years to realize that there was life beyond guilt. As a teenager, I had fear in my relationships. Fear of making mistakes, of displeasing others, of not being good enough. I said sorry for everything. If someone bumped into me, I apologized. If someone hurt me, I kept quiet and said, "It's my fault, I'm just too sensitive." I shrank from life like someone asking for permission to exist. I became too obedient, too quiet, submissive. I thought that, to be accepted, I needed to disappear. Because that's what they taught me, that I took up too much space, that I was too much of a hindrance. I was afraid of becoming a mother. Very afraid. I thought, what if I repeat what they did to me? I didn't want to hurt anyone the way I was hurt. I didn't want to repeat the abandonment that shaped me. But when my first daughter was born and looked at me with those pure eyes, something began to change inside me. At that moment, I understood what it meant to love. To truly love. To love without demanding, without manipulating, without controlling. And more than that, I understood what it meant to love. I never received it. For a long time, I blamed myself for even surviving. I wondered why God allowed all this. Why my mother had to die, why I was left alone, why that woman targeted me. I told myself that if all that happened, it was because I deserved it. That maybe I was born wrong. But time, children, and the truth have a strength that lies cannot withstand for long. I started writing. In old notebooks, hidden away. I started telling myself my story. I remembered every detail. Every night I slept, crying. every time I asked for help and was not heard. And, in the midst of these memories, I started hearing another voice, a new voice, weak at first, but insistent. It wasn't your fault. This sentence scared me at first, because everything in me reacted against it. How come? Wasn't it my fault? My mind screamed. Yes, it was. You should have done better, spoken better, been more invisible, more obedient. But this new voice, it wouldn't give up. It was at a meeting with a therapist, years later, that I heard someone say this out loud. You were a child, and no child is to blame for being mistreated. Those words disarmed me. They took me apart. I cried like I hadn't cried in a long time. Not the kind of silent, hidden cry, but a cry that comes from deep inside. The cry of someone who, for the first time, has been welcomed. It took me a long time to let this truth sink in. Because living with guilt becomes a habit. It becomes part of our identity. We get used to putting ourselves last, to blaming ourselves for everything, to thinking that we don't deserve love, respect, or joy. But I slowly learned that being a victim is not shameful, that speaking out is not betrayal, that remembering is not bitterness, it is justice for one's own soul. It was then that I understood. My childhood was not my fault. My stepmother's coldness was not my fault. My father's silence was not my fault. The pain I carried was not my choice. I simply survived. And surviving was already an act of courage. Many of my traumas still echoed, even as an adult. Difficulty trusting, loving myself, seeing myself with tenderness. But when I started to take care of the girl, I was that girl who just wanted to be heard. Something new was born inside me. I started writing letters to her, to myself. Letters saying, I believe in you. You are not guilty. You deserve love. These words were medicine. Words that, if they had been said back then, might have cured a lot of things. But even though they were late, they were necessary. Because we are never too old to free ourselves from a lie. Today, when I hear someone blaming themselves for being hurt, my soul trembles. Because I know that prison. I lived in it for decades. I know the weight of carrying a burden that was never ours. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that there's a huge difference between responsibility and guilt. When we're kids, we are someone's responsibility. If these adults fail, it's their fault, not ours. It took me a lifetime to understand this, but I did. And understanding was the first step to forgiving myself, not them. Budo me, because the cruelest thing wasn't what they did to me, it was what they did believe about myself. And today, with the voice of a grandmother who has seen a lot, I can say with firmness, it took me years to understand that it wasn't my fault. But now I know, and I'll never forget it. For a long time, I kept quiet. Not because I wanted to, but because I learned to keep quiet. Because I was taught that my pain was an exaggeration, that my crying was annoying, that my story was better forgotten, and I believed it. I kept quiet in childhood, I kept quiet in adolescence, and even as an adult, I continued to carry a silence that was not mine. But there comes a time in life, sometimes late, but always necessary, when we understand that telling someone is not a weakness. It is liberation, it is healing, it is justice. Today, with white hair and hands marked by time, I tell, not for revenge, not for scandal, not for pity, but for something greater. Because if this story leaves me and enters the heart of someone who needs to hear it, then it was worth not forgetting. I tell it for that girl I was. The one who dreamed of being held and received punishment. Who dreamed of freedom and slept in prison. Who asked for help with her eyes and saw only doors closing. She still lives inside me. And every time I tell her what I experienced, it's as if I'm saying to her, I see you now, but I also tell it for those who are still there. For those who have not yet managed to escape. For those who are living exactly what I lived, thinking they are alone, that they are guilty, that they deserve it. I tell it because one deserves to grow up afraid to exist. If someone had told me, when I was little, that this wasn't normal, maybe I would have understood sooner. If someone had told me that what I felt had a name, that what I suffered was violence, maybe I wouldn't have kept quiet for so long. That's why today, when I speak, it's as if I'm breaking the cycle. A cycle that begins in silence and ends in trauma. When we speak, the cycle is exposed. It's like lighting a candle in a dark room. We see the mess, we see the dirt, but we also see the way out. Many people think that abuse only exists if there are marks. They only believe it if there is blood, screams, and witnesses. But what I experienced and what so many other children experience is more silent, more disguised. It is the kind of pain that hides behind beautiful words, in organized homes, in respectful families. My stepmother never had to raise her voice to destroy me. She just had to look at me. She just had to laugh when I cried. She just had to pretend to love me in front of others. She just had to repeat that everything was my fault, until I believed it myself. And this silent destruction is the cruelest. That's why I'm speaking today. Because while we keep these stories quiet, they keep repeating themselves. Their faces change, their addresses change, but they continue. And maybe if one little girl hears my story and thinks, that sounds like me, then that little girl is no longer alone. I tell the stories of those who were never believed, who were called liars, dramatic, ungrateful. I was called all of these things, and I know how much it hurts when we express our pain and the other person returns contempt. But the truth is persistent. It survives even under years of silence, and when it comes to light, it comes with force. I also count for those who saw and did nothing, like my father, like the neighbors, like the teachers who suspected but backed off. I tell you to remember that omission also hurts. That remaining silent in the face of a child's suffering is being an accomplice to those who hurt them. But above all, I tell those who need to know that it is possible to survive. That even if you are scarred, even if you are broken, even if you distrust the whole world, you can still rebuild yourself. I am proof of that. It's not easy. It's not quick. Sometimes we feel strange, even in our own bodies. Sometimes we look in the mirror and still see the scared child, waiting for help. But with time and truth, the soul begins to return. It begins to breathe. It begins to say, I am more than what they did to me. Today, when I hug my grandchildren, I feel that the cycle has been broken. They look at me with confidence. They tell me their fears, their dreams, their doubts. And I listen with all the love I never received. Because now I know what a child needs to flourish. They need to be seen, heard, respected. And even though I didn't have that, I chose to be that. So yes, I tell. I tell so that my pain was not in vain. I tell so that other voices may rise up. I tell so that the silence that hurt me may now be broken by words that heal. If I could go back in time and meet the girl I was, only say 3 things. You are not alone. It is not your fault, and it will pass. And perhaps, now, as I tell all this, that is exactly what I am saying, not just to myself, but to every hidden soul who listens and recognizes themselves. Because when we survive the darkness and find words to name what we experienced, what was once a wound becomes a bridge. And maybe this bridge of mine will take someone back to themselves. If this story touched your heart, write a comment, a message of support for our grandma. She had the courage to tell what so many still hide. If you have also gone through something difficult and overcome it, share your experience. This can help someone who is suffering in silence. Don't forget to leave a subscribe to the channel. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear this truth. It is clear. Watch the next video now, which can touch your heart even deeper.